Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. My name is Joey Weaver. He is Mike McDaniel. Mike, season previews rolling on. It's time to talk about my favorite team. Should we talk about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets?
Let's do it. Kelly Quinlan, publisher, jacketsonline.com from the Rivals Network. Kelly, what's going on, man? Welcome back to the pod. It's about that time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Should be a fun season here. No shortage of off-season content for you, especially going through the coaching change that Georgia Tech went through. So we can start it there. Geoff Collins fired last year after 4 games at the end of 3+ years, basically in his tenure. Brent Key promoted as the interim. That went well. Brent Key won 4 out of 8 games. Not sure Geoff Collins could say he won 4 games in any of the previous seasons that he was there, so that was kind of interesting. But I guess let's go back to the coaching search just a little bit. In your opinion, the way that whole search played out, it seemed like Key was not the number one pick. What were your thoughts kind of on the way that search played out, and do you think that they ended up with a really good candidate based on what we've seen so far?
So here's my favorite Brent Key stat that I love to bring up when they talk about this. Brent Key in his first 2 games was the first Georgia Tech coach to win back-to-back games since Paul Johnson's last season. That's my favorite Geoff Collins /
Very specific, very specific.
Yeah, it took him literally the first 2 games he coached to break something that had gone on for 3+ years.
Yeah.
It was interesting. The search was very fascinating. I had sort of heard all along that the money was behind Brent Key. If you want to look at it that way, like the people who had the most influence over what was going on. And the reality of it was, with the financial situation at Georgia Tech and the fact they had to eat so much money firing Geoff, and they just fired their AD, and they were still kind of digging out of COVID debt and had not made money the previous 2 years, that everything in my mind was like, if you're making a financial decision in Georgia Tech, what are you looking at? And you can kick the can down the road. Brent's got a lot of momentum behind him, a lot of fan support. You can give him an opportunity. Financially, he's not going to screw you over as much as if you had to go buy, Alex Golish, who's the guy that I would have gone after, right? That's at USF now. If you were going to go hire a young buck OC, that was the guy. Or if you were going to go hire the guy from Coastal Carolina, whose name I'm blanking out on.
Jamie Chadwell.
Yeah, so Jamie Chadwell wanted, $4 million+. There was, there were a lot of that. There were guys like Matt Rule that were using Georgia Tech as leverage. He was one of the guys who was in the mix. Willie Fritz, who had this very weird situation where it was leaked to the media, I think intentionally, that he was going to maybe get the job to block it or to eat or just to throw people off. I don't know what that was about, because the whole time that was going on, if everyone remembers, I kept reporting that it wasn't happening, because that was what I was hearing from the people who had to agree to the hiring of the head coach. And so ultimately, Angel Cabrera and Jay Back came together and decided to give Brent his opportunity. And the big thing with Brent was that he had a plan and he had an idea of how to fix things and do it economically, just increasing support staff, building up the program, building organically, recruiting, all of the things you're looking for. He had a plan for it. He had thought all this out. I think, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm sure he had been thinking about it for, probably 13, 14 months before it happened.
I would have said most of the time he had been there under Collins.
Yeah, I think he thought that if things went sideways, that this was a possible outcome of it, and to have a plan for it. All good coaches have a plan, and he had a plan. He was able to execute it, and he got the team to play hard. And the proof will be in the pudding now. How does he get them to play every day, and what does that look like? But the search was weird, man. And J-Bat had things very buttoned up, the AD, and there just were not a lot of leaks out of it. And so you had people there were even some people, I think, that were sort of guessing as to what was going on, that would people who would be normally in the loop even. In typical coaching searches, or were in the loop when Geoff got hired. And so Jay just kind of went into this bunker and was doing a search, and I have a good relationship with Brent. I'd stayed in touch with him all this, and the one thing he had told me is he would give me a heads up if he was out of it. And I never got that call either. And so, knowing Brent the way I did, I assumed even when Ken Segura at the AJC was reporting that Willie got hired, that there was something else going on. And I would call other sources, and they were like, "Yeah, nothing." Brent was like, "I hadn't heard anything." So at that point, I felt pretty confident that it wasn't happening, and I wasn't sure why and what was going on. And Jay had always been kind of forthright with me, but he wasn't going to talk to me about it. So, yeah, it was a weird time, man. Just watching it all unfold. And then it was even stranger with Damon Stoudemire, the basketball coach, because that went down in 48 hours, basically. So Jay kind of moves at his own beat. And so I think you saw that with his coaching search. He exhausted everything he was looking at and then came to what I think was the most logical decision.
The other thing I've sensed is that there's a lot of mixed opinions within the fan base on, was it a good coaching search? Did they get to the right place? Did they not? The thing that I've stuck with basically ever since that I just can't get out of my head is that it was like a Sunday afternoon or a Monday morning that Collins was fired and they pulled that trigger and Brent was named the interim. And I just keep thinking back, and they had maybe 4 practices between then and the Pittsburgh game. And so they go from looking, lifeless, incompetent, didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do against UCF on a Saturday. And in 4 practices, then they turn around, go on the road to the defending division champs and go and beat them in their building. And then the following week beat Duke. And it's like that team looked totally different after just a few practices. Am I putting too much credence into that, or should I be looking at that as that tells me something that this guy knows what he's doing coaching a team?
So it's one of two things, right? It's either an indictment on Geoff Collins, or it's a statement about how good a coach Brent Key is. I think it probably falls in the middle of that. They should have beat UCF. UCF gave them every opportunity in the world to win that game, and they lost, and that was the end of it. They fired Geoff. It was on a Monday. They practiced Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday's a walkthrough, and then they went to the stadium up at Pittsburgh on Friday and did a walkthrough in the stadium. So they basically had 2 real practices and a walkthrough. And they went up there and won a game that was touch and go, where they weren't playing great. A guy from Pitt dropped 3 interceptions in that game. They caught a lot of breaks and won that game. And then the Duke game was sort of the opposite of that. They were in control and blew it and almost lost the game. But the kids believed, and it would have been. The thing I still go back to is, what if Jeff Sims doesn't get hurt at the end of the Duke game? If they're able to control that game, he doesn't get hurt, and he continues playing the way he was playing, they probably beat Miami and they probably beat Virginia Tech and win 7 games. And then I think it was a no-brainer that Brent gets the job. So it was very interesting how that unfolded. The win at North Carolina was as good a coaching job as I've ever seen in that game against Georgia. Kirby Smart told him it was that was a conversation they had at midfield. He goes, "That was a hell of a plan you guys came up with," and they scared them. They would have played better in the championship game than TCU did, apparently.
Had the lead through 24 minutes of that game.
Yeah, I think Ohio State gave them their biggest scare, and then probably Georgia Tech was next, for Georgia that season. And that was all, to me, impressive. That was them coaching on the fly, adjusting. Hell, they, got rid of a running backs coach after that and had, and he had to patch his O-line coach with his GA who was coaching O-line. And, it wasn't like they were just walking in and things were hunky-dory. They had to do a lot of tinkering with the staff, and he managed all of that and got the team to be competitive every day and play tough. Play what I've always considered Georgia Tech football. They were always a tough team with Cham, with Leary, certainly, with Bobby Ross. That was what they were known for. And it got back to being that again, which was good to see. Paul Johnson's teams are always like that. Punch above your weight, always have a chance when you go into the game. And with Brent, you started to see it, even though you didn't. We all thought they were going to get smoked at Pittsburgh. There was a whole discussion in the press box before the game. We were sitting there joking around. The Pitt media all thought they were going to boat race them, and And it didn't happen on the field. It was like going to Virginia Tech the last few times Georgia Tech went there and played with the backup quarterback against the Hokies.
Keep the Virginia Tech slides
though.
coming. We love those on this show.
Jesus.
No, it just is always funny to me that the string of Georgia Tech backup quarterbacks knocking off the Hokies is one of the funniest, one
Just
of the most improbable things I've ever seen.
It's really one of
was the year they did it with the backup center, the backup
Yes.
quarterback, and the backup running back.
Yep, I was lucky enough to be in attendance for that one.
I lost
One of
so
Justin
much money on that game.
one of Justin Fuente's crowning achievements as head coach, of which he had many, was losing to Georgia Tech backup quarterbacks.
Yeah, that was the fun game where Frank Beamer was next to me on the other side of the glass in the press box, and I got to watch his reaction to the game unfolding, and him getting more and more angry. And then he could barely speak in the elevator because I happened to get on the elevator with him at the end of the game to go down to the field, and he, I guess, was leaving, and just he was so angry he couldn't speak. So that was very funny.
Fuente has that effect on people. Yeah. Anyway,
he was probably more damaging than even Geoff Collins in some way, because Geoff at least recruited talent. Like, I think Virginia Tech is. I think if you talk to Brett Pry, he would tell you they're a little bit devoid of talent right now. That's their main issue. It's not really coaching. I don't think they have a coaching problem.
agree.
No, I'm not trying to pick on the Hokies. It's just
No. I mean, it's a good. Well, no, it's a good transition, with the coaching staff, because that's what we are going to get into next. So Brent Key retains Andrew Thacker as his defensive coordinator, and then he brings over Buster Faulkner, who was, he's been a quality control offensive analyst, right, for Georgia for the last number of years. He helped develop Stetson Bennett into what he became kind of out of nowhere into this, he's going to be a college football Hall of Fame type quarterback just because of his, career accolades alone. What is there to expect of the Georgia Tech offense moving forward, right? Because I think the long pole in the tent, obviously, when Collins took over initially was, okay, we are transitioning away from the Paul Johnson option offense. We have to install an offense that's going to be multiple, is kind of what he said at the start. And that just never really panned out. And now Buster Faulkner comes in, and it's almost like he, in some ways, gets a head start on the rebuild because Collins was at least bringing in talent to kind of transition away from the option offense. At least Faulkner doesn't have to do that. But what are things going to look like offensively, and then defensively with Thacker, being retained? How big is that for Brent Key in terms of transition from interim to now, full-time head coach?
So I would say, on the offensive side of things, it's NCAA spread, multiple formations, the stuff that they were slowly building up to. The issue they had with the transition was they didn't tier their personnel to what they had on the roster, what the strength of the roster was. So, like, they were using their tight ends as basically glorified offensive linemen, even though they brought in a kid from UConn, Tyler Davis, who's playing in the NFL now. Like, they just didn't seem to understand what to do with the personnel that they had. I think Buster's done a much better job, even from what we've seen in the spring and in practices, of understanding this is what I have right now, this is where our deficiencies are, this is how I'm going to get the ball out quickly. And that was one thing that Georgia was really good at, and Todd Monken was, they played 12, 13 personnel at times, because they had a bunch of tight ends and the receivers weren't as great. So how do I figure out the way to get, my best 5 skill guys on the field at the same time? So I think that's what they're doing now. They have some mixed experience at receivers, so that's sort of what I would call a weaker spot on the team right now. Got good experience at running back, experienced tight ends, slots should be decent. So I feel like they're just going to play, and they showed in the spring game. They would line up in 12 and have 2 slot receivers on the field instead of outside receivers. Things like that were more creative. Like, that's what I've been waiting to see with this. Like, you don't have to line up and play 11 personnel and pretend like you're an NFL team. As Paul Johnson joked with me the first year, he asked me if the offensive coordinator was playing for draft picks. He's like, he realizes this is college football, not the NFL. You don't get draft picks for tanking. Like, I did, that was his, he didn't understand what they were doing offensively, and he's a smart guy. And I agreed with him. I didn't understand what the hell they were doing either. I think Buster knows what he's doing. Buster's a sharp guy. Buster's been very successful at a lot of different jobs, and he was a guy that was in the hierarchy there of potentially being a replacement for Todd Monken down the line. And Mike Bobo happens to be, a was a foot in front of him, and so he got the job instead of Buster. And so now Buster's at Georgia Tech, and he has the opportunity to carve out his own path. I'm sure he still wants to be a head coach. He has got all sort of the things you look for and that stuff, and I think he's going to do a good job. On the defensive side, they have probably 15 of the 22 regular guys on defense back this year. They lost the starting corner, they lost the 2 linebackers, but returned, and they lost Cam White, who got drafted on the defensive line. But
Go Pats, baby.
Sylvain Yondagen, who was as effective as Cam White in a lot of games. They bring in, 3 transfer linebackers who all played a lot. Braylon Oliver at Minnesota, Dre White from A&M, and then Paul Maiola from Idaho/Notre Dame, who was a really heralded recruit as a safety and now plays Sam linebacker and play weak side linebacker. They got some dudes. I think defense will be okay. I'm a little worried about corner when I look at it. I just, Miles Sims was pretty good last year. He had a bad spring because he was dealing with some injuries. He's got to bounce back. And Kenyatta Watson, Kenan Johnson, probably fighting for that other corner spot, or those 3 guys will probably be the base corners out of that, 2 or 3 of them. But their safeties are as good as anyone in the ACC right now, for Miles Brooks and Jay King and CP Lee, and then the nickel KJ Wallace is very solid. So I think they have a nice core. The D-line's been getting better and better. The one thing that was probably the 2 big things that were transitioned from going from Paul to Geoff Collins, and the one gift that Geoff gave Brent Key is that they really did rebuild the defensive line organically. They did what they should have done with the offensive line, and they signed all these kids right out of the box because they had lost so many guys with Paul, and they had gone to the odd front and recruited less. They signed all these big dudes, and they're now getting older. So you have the Zeke Biggers, you have the Daquan Dowse, the Josh Robinsons. All these dudes are bigger defensive bodies. Noah Collins, they've signed over the last few years. They're now 3rd, 4th year in the program, 5th year. And they look like a good college defensive line, and that was the biggest difference for them defensively last year. They were able to press your quarterback for the first time consistently and command double teams, and if you can do that, you got a chance. You can't cover people forever, and that was the thing that killed them early on, and it's killed a lot of teams in the league if you can't get pressure. So I think they'll be decent defensively. The offense, I think if the offense and the defense are in the top 70, they'll have a decent season.
That's been one of the things that, I'll give Collins and that tenure credit where it's due, is that I have gotten excited at some of the enormous bodies on the defensive line that they have brought in, that I felt like for like a decade under Paul Johnson, they had such a time playing 295-pound nose tackles and stuff like this. And it's like, really, you can't find anybody who's like 330, to sit there in the middle. And so that's been good to see, and a nice change. I think makes a lot of things easier on your defensive coordinator and the schemes and such.
Yeah, they lost a whole D-line class to their basically drug policy at one point.
Yeah.
In the 2017 class, whatever class that was, 16, 20, whatever class that was. Like, they had 3 different dudes get bounced out that all ended up playing at other schools. Like legit playing. One of them got in trouble for dogfighting, and I think he's in jail now, but at his next school. But
who was that? I'll think of it anyways.
The kid that went to East Carolina from Maryland. Commission or something like that.
Commission? Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Huh.
I think that was when he got in trouble, allegedly. I don't remember. I haven't tracked the story well enough. But yeah, all those dudes, they lost an entire D-line class and a couple skill guys in that class because of like a weird decision made by the administration at the time with testing. And those things add up. Paul had a lot of uphill battles too that kind of wore him out. But yeah, he didn't have a ton of Horace Lockett looking dudes out there, or Zeke Biggers, or even Shameik Jones is a kid that just got on campus. He's like 6'7" and 300 pounds. Like he looks like a more in shape Zeke Biggers. It's like, wow, like this kid's gonna be something when he can put weight on his upper body. Like, you can see those things, and some of it Brent has done, and some of it, a lot of it was Geoff. Geoff did know defensive talent. Geoff knew how to recruit guys. I think where they failed was his offensive coordinator hires, him tinkering with the defense, and special teams, and then also the offensive line recruiting philosophy was not good. He had Brent trying to bodge it instead of just taking L's early, signing like 7 guys a year, and then people forget too they had like 3 guys medical out of the first class they signed. They signed 7 linemen, and only 3 of them are still on campus now.
That thing will hurt you over time. Yep. Kelly, I wanted to ask you about the quarterback situation. And I know that it's been funny to me a couple things listening to some of the national previews of the ACC. And anytime you talk about Georgia Tech, everyone's just talking like it's just an easy assumption that Haynes King is going to be the starter because, well, he was the former high 4-star, 5-star guy, whatever, out of Texas A&M. Jimbo loved him, like all this stuff. And yet I've heard you say multiple times on multiple programs, right now Haynes King is the backup.
Yeah, it's funny. And like on our rivals rankings, we had Zach Pyron higher rated than Haynes King coming out of high school. People forget Pyron was committed to Baylor and ended up wanting to be closer to home, so he made the decision to reopen his recruitment. And Georgia Tech sort of just worked out that they fell together, and he built a relationship with Brent Key and the OC at the time, and the family liked what Atlanta had to offer, and that was close to home because they're from Alabama, and that sort of just happened. Haynes has a relationship with Chris Winkie, the quarterback's coach, co-OC, and Haynes has got a lot of talent, and so does Zach. And Zach has sort of the X factor with the leadership and the moxie piece of it. And to be honest, like I won't be shocked if they both play, but I'd be pretty damn shocked if one of them, if it was just Haynes King outright as the starter all year. And going out of the spring, Zach Pyron had the job at that point. If they were to go play a game, he would start quarterback. And now they're in the competition phase, so we don't know. Like I couldn't tell you right now one or the other of any of the 3 is going to be the starting quarterback for sure, because that's all getting figured out now in the field. And that's the one thing about Brent and his staff. They're not going to give anyone anything. You got to go out and earn it. So if Haynes ends up being the guy, great. But he was not that. Like in the spring, he had a couple nice throws at the beginning of the spring game. He was going against 2 defense. One of the corners was a walk-on that he was throwing against. There was a lot of stuff that people weren't like picking up on and were like so impressed with him. And that's not a knock on Haynes. It's just they put him in a situation to be successful, and then they switched him to the one offense and he didn't move the ball as well. So, all that to say, it's an open race between those 2 guys, really. Zach Gibson's the 3rd guy. They've had to play 3 quarterbacks, really, the last few years, given the line problems and injuries. So you never know. He's a guy who they figured out a way to win and with him and to put him in a situation where they didn't ask him to do the stuff that Jeff Sims had to do offensively, and he was able to be successful once they figured that out. So, I think they can win games with all 3 quarterbacks if they had to. I think it's a 2-man race with Pyron and King. And my money's on Pyron just based on what I've seen with my own eyes to this point. But I'm not in practice every day, and I'm not watching. And they just put pads on today as we're recording this for the first time. So, that's going to sort all this out. They have 2 scrimmages left, and they're going to tax the hell out of those dudes mentally between now and then to figure out who the guy is.
What do you think the ceiling is on the quarterback position overall? Because, we've seen some Pyron last year, right? And then he got banged up, of course. And then we saw some Haynes King in a different system and clearly didn't pan out, right? So, what do you think the ceiling on the quarterback position is? Because the reason why I ask this, too, is, across the ACC, we're seeing this where you have a guy who hasn't played a lot, and then you have a transfer coming in, right, that didn't pan out elsewhere. And I feel like that's a handful of quarterback jobs across the conference. Georgia Tech, of course, is one of them.
Yeah, you even have guys that slumped like Van Dyke last year.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that was a Virginia quarterback.
Armstrong?
Yeah, Brandon Armstrong struggled most of the year because his offensive coordinators made
terrible.
I think that they need someone just to distribute the ball, and they're not going to be expecting some guy to go throw for 3,500 yards and 40 touchdowns. I think if you can be 2-to-1 on TD interception ratio and 200 something yards a game. I think that will be sufficient. They'll be able to run the football. And Brent Key wants to play, and Buster was with a team that won by running the football at Georgia. I think they're going to try to possess the ball. Brent talked about how they're going to play with tempo and try to throttle up and down. And, I think there's a way to do that. If you're successful in defense, that also changes the math a little bit. If they're in shootouts, then, yeah, maybe they are going to have to put more numbers. But I think generally this is probably a team that's going to be playing, 28, 35-point games inside. Like, they're not going to be in the 40s and 50s. So I think that just, 2-to-1 TD interception ratio you're looking for, 250 yards running from the quarterback. Doesn't have to be crazy stuff, just efficiency. They haven't had that in a long time. They just haven't had an efficient, normal pocket quarterback since, Goose? 22 years ago? It's been a long time. So they've been through some bad QB play, really, other than Nesbitt and Justin Thomas, who are more of runners. So, yeah, just, seeing, just down the middle, right? Pit offense, type stuff would be pretty solid for them. Better Kenny Pickett, not first 2-year Kenny Pickett, second, third, fourth-year Kenny Pickett, not fifth-year Kenny Pickett.
Not asking for a Heisman
finalist. 6th-year, 7th-year Kenny Pickett.
That'd be dope, though, yeah.
It would be if they got that, but I just think these guys are growing pains. Haynes is a young dude. Did develop at A&M. It was in a horrible offense. It was like watching Geoff Collins' offense in the first year at Georgia Tech last year. And then Zach did a nice job with the guy that head was on a swivel playing for the first time. He told me his adrenaline was so high in the first game he went in that he almost passed out at halftime. Because he just sucked all the life out of himself playing, football for the first time in college. So, that dude's trying to. This is all first for him. It's first for Haynes at Georgia Tech. I don't know what to expect. They're still young guys. That's the thing people don't realize either. They're both, they're a year apart. Zach's, redshirt freshman. Haynes is, I guess, a true junior this year going into his third year. So, second year, third year guys. Not redshirt senior, not COVID seniors. I think you've got to set realistic expectations.
The one thing I was going to bring up, too, that I think is really nice as compared to last year is that you have a starter and a backup. Whichever one's the starter, whichever one's the backup, you have a pair of them that if one of them has to go out, if one of them's underperforming, you can keep running basically the same game plan with the backup. Whereas, last year, they had injuries and such. They played 4 different guys primarily, I think, and every one of them basically needed a different game plan.
Yeah, you had Jeff Sims, who was a dynamic dual threat quarterback in the traditional Jordan Travis, whatever, that role at Florida State, that kind of guy with legs and stuff. And then you had Zach Gibson, who was a straight pocket quarterback with a good arm but needed time and to be comfortable in the pocket throw. You had Zach Pyron as a freshman, kind of a decent runner but not great, decent arm, not great, sort of moxie quarterback. And then they had Tyson Pumachan, who couldn't throw the ball 10 feet in front of him, but could run pretty well and would come in and run the ball. And they used those 4 guys. Once Jeff got hurt, it was the 3 guys and then 2 when Pyron broke his collarbone in the Miami game. So, it's interesting. You have 3 guys now that are more similar. I think Zach Gibson talked about it. He was trying to improve his running because he realized he wasn't going to play in Buster's offense if he couldn't run the ball a little bit better. And he hired a track coach to work with him on his speed just to see if he could get more out of that. I think they won't have to blow the offense up when they bring in other guys, and that was the big problem with even talking to Chip Long, who had a good relationship with the OC last year. He was we would have to blow up what we were doing if we went change quarterbacks too much. And so everything you prepared for that week went out the window as soon as Zach Gibson came in for Jeff Sims. And it's hard to coach that way. And they finally, that was a big knock I had on Geoff Collins too. They take Jeff Sims and Tucker Gleason, who are 2 totally different types of quarterbacks in the same class. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, pick what you want and go after that. If it's a dual threat guy, go sign a dual threat guy. And I think you're seeing that with Brent. Two guys they signed are both traditional quarterbacks, like that are committed in this class. And Aaron Philo and Graham Knowles. Like they're just normal quarterbacks. They're not dual threat guys. They're not guys that are going to blow you up with their legs. And that's where they want to go. So that's great. Like, have an identity and recruit to that.
Strengths and weaknesses of this team, right? So, I mean, we got into the defense. We know that, I think you said, 15 or 16 of the 22 are back. So you got starters at a lot of positions, right? And then depth, obviously, across the defense back. Offensive line, another year of continuity. Quarterback, I don't want to call it question marks. It's two guys that have played college snaps. I think that's important, but it's more of a question mark there. How do you assess the strengths and weaknesses of this roster, just like high level position wise?
I mean, I think if you want to look at the strengths of it, I think the offensive line is 7-8 guys deep for the first time since 2016, probably at Georgia Tech. Like, that's been a perennial issue. Tight end positions, I would say 3.5 deep. Jackson Long's probably close to being a guy who's ready to help. They have Brett Seither and Dylan Leonard, who's been a multi-year starter now, back, and Luke Benson, who's played a lot, back. Slot receiver, I think they're really talented there. Malik Rutherford and Christian Leary are both really dynamic guys. Outside receivers, we get into the questions because the production, just not a lot of traditional production there. A kid from Duquesne and Abdul Janae, Dominic Blaylock, who played at Georgia some, but battled injuries there. Chase Lane, who was a guy that was productive at A&M early in his career and then less so later. And then a kid named Eric Singleton they brought in, who's a speedster guy that's going to turn some heads. So, I look at running back as a strength. I think the quarterback position's okay. A little worried about just the outside receiver position. Just who's going to be the guy that steps up and is a productive guy there? Is it someone like DJ Moore, who did play last year, that redshirted, that's a really talented guy they love? I don't know. Is it Singleton? Is it the veteran guys they brought in like Lane or Blaylock or Janae? And, on the defensive side of the ball, I would say, corners, a concern I mentioned already. Getting the production needed out of linebackers. Those two guys had 250 tackles or whatever it was last year. Charlie and Trey Thomas and Ian Ely. They're both in the NFL right now. Where do you get that? Charlie Thomas was an eraser, too. That's the thing that people don't realize with him. Could run sideline to sideline, make plays, strip the ball, intercept the ball, do all kinds of stuff. I remember the year before last, he had like the only interception against the FBS team, I think, by Georgia Tech on the defense in 2021. I mean, it's just, some of the stats were unbelievable how bad the defense had been.
Stats that can't be true, but somehow are.
Yeah, I mean, they went like a full 16 games or something with an interception from a corner. Just, crazy stats. And they got away from that last year and started getting some turnovers and stuff. But I think the D-line's very good. I think they're really talented there finally. I think the nickel safety position's deep and talented. I think they have as good a safety collection of dudes as anyone in the league. The other question I look at is, I think Gavin Stewart was a very solid kicker a year ago. David Shanahan really struggled punting, and they had punts blocked, punts returned for touchdowns. That whole thing was a hot mess. They brought in some guys to compete with him. They brought in a very talented special teams coach, Ricky Brumfeld, to work with him. How does that look? Who are the return guys? Because we need to get a little more out of that, too. So those are sort of the areas where I look at. I'm not as worried about the quarterback position as some other people.
Let's take a quick second to remind you about Section103.com. It is the internet's premier place for all things wonderful, wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. They have t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies. They got a couple of three-quarter shirts. They got buttons, stickers, all sorts of things. Things for men, women, children, something for the whole family. Every Georgia Tech fan in your life can use something from Section103.com. Use promo code GOACC for 10% off your first order. They've got some new things all the time coming. Recently came out with some new player shirts. Jerseys, I guess as the kids would call them. Things with a logo on the front, a number on the front, and a number on the back, along with a name. They got shirts for both Zach Pyron as well as Dante Smith, who kind of project to be Georgia Tech's starting quarterback and running back this year. So if you want to support those players, I believe they get some NIL money out of it too. So just keep that in mind for what it's worth. They've got the Juniors Grill shirt. They've got all sorts of great products there. They've also recently come out with a clearance section. So if you're looking for some T-shirts or a couple of hoodies for a slightly lower price point, go check out the clearance section. Once again, it is section103.com or at section_103 on Instagram. Give them a follow. Check it out. All things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. Again, using the official team colors, the official word marks, everything. It is all officially licensed. It is super comfortable, super high quality. I love mine. You will love yours as well. Check out the performance wear if you're looking for things to keep you cool here during the summer. In any case, one more time, that is section103.com, the internet's best place for all things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. That's it for now. Let's get back to the show. Is there an area, Kelly, that you look at and you think, the starters are looking, or the guys that we figure are going to start, look pretty good. I feel pretty confident there, but the moment somebody gets hurt, the depth is not really there. There's a pretty big drop-off from the starters to the backups that could become a problem at some point.
Yeah, I would say probably the linebacker position. I think there's 4 guys there that are pretty good. Dre White and Oliver and Maola and a kid named Trinelius Tatum. Then when you get behind them, there's like 0 career snaps behind those 4 dudes. Like Kyle Eford's played special teams in redshirt last year. Tyson Miguez played a little bit of special teams, was hurt his first 2 years. And then they have 3 freshmen and a couple of walk-ons. And so, the experience there really falls off. And Dre White was hurt throughout a lot of the spring, didn't play in the spring game. Braylon Oliver was a little banged up. I think Paul Maiola has done both Achilles or one Achilles. He had a serious Achilles injury at Notre Dame that ended as how he ended up at Idaho. So those are things that make you a little nervous with those guys. And the thing I talk about with Andre White and Oliver is like they have played a crap ton of football. They're both super seniors, and they were in the Big Ten playing 1,000 career plus snaps plus all those practices. It's a lot of wear and tear on your body at linebacker in a very physical league for both of them, one in the SEC and one in the Big Ten. So, what point do you concerned about breaking down from that? And those dudes, they look like older dudes. They're in the ice tubs and doing the things you got to do to protect your body. But that makes me a little nervous. So I'd say that's the one position where I'm like, it's a little thin.
Kelly, let's take a look at the schedule. And I think the one thing that obviously benefits the Jackets is they're missing future ACC champion Virginia Tech. I almost got through that. With a straight face.
Wrestling or football?
Yeah,
I bet they're good in wrestling.
Very good. Wrestling. Yeah, very, very good in wrestling and women's basketball. That's about it right now. In all seriousness, like you draw Clemson on the road, you draw Georgia. Obviously, these are 2 really tough teams that you're getting Clemson on an annual basis. Never good, and then you have the rivalry game against Georgia. The redone schedule, you don't have Florida State. Like I mentioned, you don't have to, go to Blacksburg, play Virginia Tech. But you look at the schedule, and I do think there are a couple of key swing games in here. Opening up on it's in Atlanta, but it's a bona fide neutral site game, I guess, against Louisville. I think it's a really important game early in a rebuild, obviously, at Louisville, which, Joey and I have mentioned this on a couple of other season previews we've been doing with teams that draw Louisville later in the year. I think getting Louisville from the jump, I think, is a really good time to get them in year 1 under Jeff Brom. On the road at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is an SEC team, and we've also seen Ole Miss field better teams than the one they're probably going to field this season, right? Wake Forest replacing a quarterback. Like, there are some winnable games on this schedule. But obviously, having Clemson, having Georgia, having to kind of pencil in 2 losses off the bat can make things tough.
Yeah, if you look at sort of the obvious win games, are probably South Carolina State, Bowling Green, probably Boston College at Virginia, where they've not historically played well, but I think that's in such bad shape that it's a winnable game. And maybe Syracuse. I'm not buying the Syracuse hype that people are selling right now. I think this might be it for Dino this year.
Yep. Either way.
And so, yeah, you get the swing game to the two big swing games for me. If you can survive the loss to Louisville if you can win it at Wake Forest, right? In week 4, and then you got to go down to You got to either go down to Miami and beat them, or you got to beat North Carolina at home. And if you do those things, I think they go bowling. And those are sort of, and they got to take care of their business in the other games. And that was the thing Geoff Collins struggled so much with. And where you want to see this team take the next step is beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Don't screw up and lose to a really bad Syracuse team in the Carrier Dome, or like lose to a bad Boston College team on the road in front of no fans. Those 2 games had no fans. 2020. Those are the games that drove the fan base nuts, losing to the Citadel or a bad Temple team or whatever. I don't think you'll see that with Brent. And, Mississippi's a mess, man. Like, they have 19 new players on defense or something insane like that. Like, they're still bringing players in today. Like, they brought in a former Georgia Tech player the other day, Jemias Griffin, who shouldn't have even been in the portal.
So like 6 former Georgia Tech players that have been there since Geoff Collins took over.
And they're just collecting them for whatever reason.
It's like Georgia Tech is the AAA team for Ole Miss at this point.
And they're not other than Jared Ivey, they don't make a ton of sense. The ones they've taken, Samari's a very solid corner, but they took the 5th string defensive tackle. They took Jemias, who was the 3rd string running back at Oregon State. I don't quite understand what you're doing, but okay. Yeah, Ole Miss is sort of a mess. That whole thing could spin out on Lane too, but the problem is that game's so early in the season that probably won't have happened by then. The game at Miami, that's a really interesting game to me. What the hell is Miami? They were not very good last year. Georgia Tech should have beat them. If Aaron doesn't break his collarbone, the game's tied in the end of the 3rd quarter. They were going in to score when he broke his collarbone and threw a pick. So, and they've had North Carolina's number for whatever reason. So, and North Carolina's now in the prove it to me phase of their thing. They should be posting the season that NC State does every year, and they somehow can't do it.
Yep.
And so, get to the 9 wins consistently. You are playing a soft schedule. There's no excuse for winning 8 games, not winning 10 games a year there. With the amount of talent they have, they just keep losing these terrible games they shouldn't lose. So, yeah, I'm not, that's in Atlanta. Clemson, they've played them tough the last couple of years, even with Geoff coaching. That was a back-and-forth game last year. They should have beat them up at Clemson the year before. I think Clemson's going to be a hell of a lot better, so I think that's going to be a tougher game. But, where I've been placing this is I see them as a 5 to 7 win team. I think if everything fell in place, you could get to 8. But I think 5 to 7 wins would, is progress. Really, you want to get to that 6th one, get to the bowl game. I think people would be very excited if they did that. And then you have something to sell now in recruiting, and Brent has some momentum behind him if they do that. And that's where they're at now. They need to jump that next barrier. They've gotten the back-to-back wins monkey off their back. Now they got to get the bowl game monkey that was another given all the time, for the last 30-something, 40 years of the program, really consistently, is going to bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's got to be the goal. And the kids are aiming higher than that, but, show me you can do that, and we'll talk about other stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. I look at this, and I think if you just put a list of team names and logos on here and say this is their schedule, it looks tough. And I'm not going to say it's not, but I think for the names and logos that are on that schedule, it's about as forgiving as maybe you could have asked for. Again, you mentioned getting Louisville early, getting Boston College at home off a bye. You get Syracuse late in the year. There's a few of these that I feel like you catch at fortunate times that set up about as well as you could have asked for. that I think maximize your opportunity to get to that bowl game. That's kind of the one thing that sticks with me with this schedule.
Yeah, the one weird one's sort of that Miami game because they have a bye before that game, and they play A&M, but they don't really play anyone before that. I think they have a game at like Temple or something. So they'll have not really played anyone before. They play the Red Hawks, I think, to open the season. But like,
and Tech is damn near on a 2-game winning streak in Miami, by the way. In Miami.
Oh, really? That's funny.
They beat them in 19, and then they almost beat them in 21, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what to make of that. Like, he literally hired the worst combination of coordinators I could imagine his first year. So I don't know what Cristobal's up to.
Neither does he.
I don't even know whose coordinators are. They all got fired, and then they all got hired so late in the process that I don't even remember who he's hired to be his coordinators at this point. So I haven't gotten into studying that since I was like 5 weeks into the season. I'm not down on studying up on the Canes yet, but yeah, it's just weird. Last year the teams I thought would be hard, some of them weren't, some of them were. So it's one of those things. I thought Duke was going to be terrible last year, and that guy did one of the greatest coaching jobs I've ever seen in the ACC, Mike Elko. So can someone pull that off? Is it the guy at BC who almost got fired because his AD is kind of crazy, like, and wants to bring in his own dude, like had one down here. He was kind of considered the hot shot coach in the league, doing a lot with a little. Wake's going to be a tough out. Like, you just don't know, man. I don't know what to make of this league. I know Clemson's going to be good, and I think Florida State's probably going to be good just because Florida State doesn't play a lot of people. And aside from that, I think picking 3, 4, 5 is pretty hard right now. That's why people have Louisville winning 9, 10 games because they don't play anyone. Like, you look at their schedule, it's like, where are the L's coming on paper, And Brom's considered a good coach, even though he had clunkers at Purdue. Really, if they survive that NC State Notre Dame part of their schedule, then they're in pretty good shape. So, I'll be interested to see what this all looks like. And the other thing that's so hard now too is the portal, and everyone's so portal heavy that you don't know what that looks like and how much teams change from year to year, and like who's on what team, and Sam Hartman's at Notre Dame, and how's Mitch Griffiths do, or how does Brendan Armstrong do at his new school, or like whatever. Like those things are all super weird, and you got to figure it out.
I feel like there are just a bunch of teams in the ACC, and Joey and I are, moving through these season previews, and really outside of Clemson and Florida State, I feel like every team we've talked about, at least so far, we've been like, yeah, anywhere between 5 and 7 wins. And it's like, I think Georgia Tech's another one of those teams. And somebody needs to come out of that pack and win 7. And it might be Georgia Tech, right? Like,
it could be Georgia Tech. It could be BC. It could be Louisville. I mean, it could be Syracuse. Like, who knows? Like, Duke. Like,
there's so many.
ACC, baby.
It's why people hate the league. They're struggling. There's like not enough. Miami sucking for the last 25 years has been probably the biggest thing that's hurt the ACC, and then Florida State getting bad for about 9 of the last 25 years. Like, that combination was not good for the league, and then VT and Georgia Tech falling down at the same time.
I think the ACC has the potential to have one of their most ACC years yet, and I don't think it's going to get the national attention it deserves if Florida State and Clemson are as good as they're supposed to be. Because I really think the rest of the teams underneath them
we're going to miss the coastal chaos, dude. This would be the year for it. Like, imagine, like, you would have – who would be the favorite if it was in the coastal this year? It'd be North Carolina, I guess.
Carolina, probably.
But Pitt's going to probably
be Miami.
9 games.
God.
Yeah, dude.
Oh,
Look, today ends in Y. It would be Miami. Like,
yeah.
I mean, and Virginia Tech would be picked last. Like,
yep.
And Georgia Tech would probably be picked actually below Virginia Tech because Virginia Tech has more media people at the ACC than Georgia Tech does, and so they get that slight bump.
I saw those media
yeah,
rankings that came out. I was like, I got a problem with like half of these. These are all
Well,
wrong.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you saw, like, I went nuts on Twitter about the guy from Clemson that didn't start last year at safety. That was the preseason all safety. There were like 3 other dudes, including Miles Brooks at Georgia Tech, who was like number 3 in Pro Football Focus last year, safeties in the country, and number 1 in the ACC. It's like this guy played corner in some games for Clemson and didn't start at safety and was good like 2 years ago. And he got, if you look at the vote counter, it's clearly the number of Clemson media that were in attendance at ACC kickoff because they give you a little vote tally. It's
Nobody
like,
else
that
voted
dude
for him.
probably got it by like 3 votes because Clemson sent like 37 people to the ACC kickoff. And there were like 6 of us covering Georgia Tech or whatever.
That tracks.
Yeah, the Clemson
Kelly-
Mafia.
So Kelly, it sounds like you're somewhere between, call it 5-7, 7-5, somewhere in that range. Are you going to commit to any one record, or are you just giving me a range?
6 and 6.
6 and
6
6.
and 6.
Cotton Mill.
Then they'll lose the bowl game, so they don't finish.
Naturally.
They'll go to the, like, what is the worst bowl now for the Fenway Bowl? Is that the worst one?
Oh,
We play in
gosh.
Fenway Park in mid-December. I would like it because I have family up there, but I don't know what the. You know what? They've been so bad that I've forgotten what the bowl tie-ins now are for like the ACC because it's been 4 years since Georgia Tech played in one.
El Paso. You can go to the Sun Bowl.
Yeah, that I love El Paso. That's actually like one of my favorite trips. It'd probably be like the Birmingham Bowl or the Gasparilla Bowl or something like that. Or
Gasparilla Bowl, let's
what's the
go.
one in Fort Worth? The First Responder Bowl.
Oh,
maybe?
yeah.
Yeah.
They play on one of those like ones that's like December 15th. It's like during the middle of Georgia Tech's finals, they're going to play a bowl game in Fort Worth and like score
If
like.
it's in
no
Fort Worth,
points
I might
because
actually make it to
it's
that one.
Yeah, again, I don't mind Dallas either. I just, the Wasabi Fenway Bowl is not really high up on my list of places. There's one called the Pop-Tart Bowl. What the hell is that? Like, which bowl is that?
Oh, that's the Cheez-It Bowl that got rebranded this year, I think.
Cheez-It Bowl. Yeah.
Oh, is that the Cheez-It Bowl? Okay.
Which is also the former Russell Athletic Bowl, I think. And
So that's the one in Orlando that's not the Citrus Bowl.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because we've now had 2 separate Cheez-It Bowls. So that's
Competing Cheez-It Bowls.
even more confusing. Yeah.
But there's still the Duke's Mayo Bowl, so we're doing okay there.
Yeah. That's the one you want to be in if you're not in the New Year's Six, pretty much.
I think that one might be gone this year. I think that one might have rebranded.
No.
Duke's Mayo?
I think it might have. Hold on, let me look. This is important.
The one that I would like to go to is, to be honest, probably the one I would like to go to is San Diego. I think that would be fun. My wife would be down for that.
Speaking of which, former bowl games that were incredible. The San Diego County Credit Union Poinsettia Bowl had no ACC ties, but one of the greatest bowl games.
Now it does.
And now it does. Yes, now it
Holiday
does.
Bowl. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
It is
play
still
what's
the-
left of the Pac-12 for now. This is probably the last year of that bowl alliance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Rose Bowl is about to be relegated to like a kickoff game in August or
The
something.
Big Ten Challenge now. Is that the
Yeah.
Rose Bowl? Isn't it like the Big Ten kickoff game?
Yeah. Yeah, they're just going to call the Rose Bowl rivalry week in the Big Ten. It's going to be annoying.
I am pleased to inform you it is still the Mayo Bowl. So
Oh, thank God.
Okay.
we still have that.
Yeah.
But the
We're still a
Wasabi
country.
Fenway Bowl should be a hoot. Birmingham
Wait till
Bowl is
the people-
actually not terrible, by the way. I've covered a couple of those.
Just wait till all the people find out the Wasabi Fenway Bowl is not sponsored by the Japanese condiment. That's actually
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Oh, is it
You and I
something
had
else?
this whole
I assumed
conversation.
it was like the Wasabi Growers of America or whatever.
it's like a finance company or like
Is it really? Okay.
yeah, something
Yeah,
something
most
like
of
that.
the things like I know what Bad Boy Mowers is, and but I don't know like the Military Bowl sponsor. I don't know what that is. The one I don't even know what the hell the ReliaQuest Bowl is. I don't even know which bowl that is. Is that the one in Nashville, or is that Jacksonville? Is that the Gator Bowl?
Yeah.
Couldn't tell
And
you.
I bet that's the Gator Bowl. I bet that one's the Gator.
All of the
For a
above.
while, they For a while, they did away with the Gator Bowl, and they were calling it the Tax Slayer Bowl, and people got so mad. After 3 years, they started calling it the Gator Bowl again. Now it was just the Tax Slayer Gator
the
Bowl.
ReliaQuest Bowl is a bowl game in Tampa, Florida. It used to be the Outback Bowl.
Oh my God, what are we doing with these bowls?
At least they could keep like the old name in, and then I would have like a hope of like remembering what it is, like the San Diego Credit Union Holiday Bowl. I remember what that is.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. I just didn't see it on this list.
Beautiful.
Only the Tiger Sun Bowl. That's so disgraceful. The Sun Bowl is a beautiful, fun like event to go to. Like El Paso is an awesome town. Great eating, fun trip. Snowed the last time I was there. They beat Lane Kiffin with his black eye. Georgia Tech against USC. They've been the preseason #1 team and were now relegated to playing in the Sun Bowl. And their players bitched about it in the local newspaper in El Paso. So all their fans, all the locals showed up to boo them and root for Georgia Tech in the bowl game. It was a tremendous day. And then Tevin Washington outpassing the 5-star quarterbacks of USC in the bowl game, who looked like they were like throwing with the wrong arm.
Lane was wearing the official outfit of being like badly hungover that day.
He looked about as hungover as he did at SEC Media Days. And I remember the media lady almost tackling me because I was taking a picture of Lane Kiffin to send my buddy who covers USC with his black eye who wasn't at the game because he finally took his sunglasses off in the presser. And I guess she was trying to protect him or something. And I was it was like early iPhone, or might even been like a Android phone or something I had. And I was trying to take a picture of him, and she got mad. I was like, lady, I've been here the last 2 straight years. You should at least remember who I am at this point. Like,
frequent flyer at this point.
yeah, because I had put like something on so my credential was covered up because it was freaking 40 degrees. And so that was like some fan taking a picture of Lane Kiffin, I guess. His black eye.
Mike, on that note, do you have a record prediction?
The Detroit Bowl or whatever the hell that was called. My worst bowl experience I've had.
Oh.
The one in Shreveport was the worst one, though. They lost to Air Force. It's the worst bowl.
Oh, I remember that one.
Shreveport, Louisiana. They lost because they dropped 3 punts in the game.
I was cursing in front of my grandmother watching that. So that went well.
Season was derailed because your boys broke Josh Nesbitt's arm. And they're boat racing them on Thursday night in Lane Stadium. That was about to be their first loss in a night game in Lane Stadium. Nesbitt broke his arm and thrust young Tevin Washington into the starting lineup, and then they proceeded to lose like 4 straight games.
Sean Bedford told me, by the way, it was like second drive that he was in with Tevin, that he had to grab him by the face mask in the huddle and yell at him to start yelling the play calls at the top of his lungs because Tevin looked scared to death. And it was like, no.
It was like they just ran like the dive, like 14 straight plays or something because Tevin was so freaked out. That was a weird. I was not at that game either because there was a whole issue with the Virginia Tech credentialing system, and they weren't credentialing electronic media, and I didn't know the loophole that everyone else was using to call like a local radio station and request credentials through a radio station. And the
Probably
guy
called Paul.
literally told me that had I done that, I would have gotten credentials. I was like, if you're telling me this, why don't you just give me the damn credential? I was like, I literally
make things easier. Skip a step.
Yeah, like, what are we doing? And then they finally changed it like the next year. But the memories of covering weird Georgia Tech football.
Of which there has been plenty.
And
The old days of the Coastal Battle of the Techs deciding the Coastal Division.
we had fun with that one, didn't we, Joey?
Oh, plenty. That's one of the slights towards this podcast is getting rid of that annual game.
I know.
The kicker who should have been in jail that beat Georgia Tech in overtime or whatever.
Cody Janelle. I was a sophomore.
Yeah, on the Labor Day game. Yeah.
Yep.
That was another favorite of mine. I was like, this dude's been kicked off the team like 4 times. Why is he still like in college? Like, let alone kicking in this game.
Dude could not stop snorting cocaine. And it just didn't matter to me as long as he made kicks, which he did not do very often, but he did in that game, which I was very happy about.
Against Georgia Tech.
Yeah. Virginia Tech was, we were all fired up about that game, and they made it all the way to like 6-6. So that was real cool. Well, the last year's a Beamer. I'm going to make a record prediction, and I'm stuck between 5 and 6 wins. I think the Louisville game in the opener is a huge swing game for bowl eligibility, and it seems silly because it's the very first one. You got 11 more after that. It just seems silly to call that game the swing game. But I look at the schedule, and Kelly, I think you hit the nail on the head with kind of the ones you can almost pencil in as wins, right? South Carolina State, Bowling Green, BC coming off a bye because I'm with you guys. I'm selling BC, and then at Virginia, Virginia, I think is going to be really, 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 really bad. And then Syracuse is kind of a crapshoot because, I think Schrader, he certainly looked good with a different offensive coordinator. Now Jason Beck, I don't know if that's going to continue, right? With Robert and I gone.
Is he playing week 14 either?
Is he playing? Is he playing then? Is Syracuse's offense, what did they even look like? Because with Jason Beck at quarterback, or Jason Beck is the offensive coordinator, he had his quarterback, Garrett Schrader, throw it 51 times in the bowl game, which was 15 more than his career high. So were they going to just go air raid with Garrett Schrader now that Sean Tucker's not in the backfield? That doesn't seem like the greatest idea in the world. So, what's Syracuse even going to be then? So, I mean, that's 5 games I just named, right? The thing is, I think Georgia Tech probably drops one of them. But here's the thing, too. I think Georgia Tech probably also wins one that we're looking at on the schedule is, not an automatic gimme. Could they beat Wake on the road in September? Certainly. They're still going to be figuring out quarterback. Is Mitch Griffiths going to replace Sam Hartman and be, the adequate replacement? I don't know that you can replace Sam Hartman and kind of what he brought to the table is, a fourth-year guy last year and now going into a fifth year at Notre Dame. Griffiths probably isn't going to be that guy in his first full year as a starter, but Wake Forest's offense under Clawson is kind of personnel agnostic, it seems like. He always just seems to get the best out of his guys, and I think the scheme's pretty good for the players they recruit. And it's on the road, but, is that a game you can pick off? Maybe, right? At Miami, I have the same questions about Miami as you guys do. Kind of a crapshoot. Georgia Tech always seems to play Miami tough. I think going on the road there is not really going on the road elsewhere in the ACC. I think you can certainly go on the road there and win. North Carolina, it's put up or shut up time, So, I mean, there's just other games on the schedule where I look at and I'm all right, Georgia Tech might not go into that game as a favorite, but I think they can certainly pick one of those games off. I'm just not confident they're 100% going to win the 5 games they should win, so I'm just going to settle on 5 and 7. But I'm with you guys. I think the 5 to 7 win range is where they're at because I think if they run the gamut and win the 5 they're supposed to win, it's not that hard to get to 7. Pick off Louisville in the opener and then beat Wake on the road or steal one against North Carolina. It's really not that difficult to see how this team gets to a bowl game or even gets to 7 wins. So I'm going to go 5 and 7 just because I'm not sure how quarterback's going to pan out. I'm just going to hedge a little bit, but I think this is certainly a team that can make a bowl game.
Joey, you're going 10 wins, right?
10 wins,
2.
That's right.
10 and 2. Only lose
14,
to
15 and 0 or whatever.
Only lose to Clemson and
Ranked.
Georgia.
Wish they would have started the 12-team playoff this year. That whole thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm with you guys. 5 to 7 wins feels like the right range. I think I was on the podcast from the Rumble seat where I used to write, and I think I told him the absolute ceiling that I could see if everything goes right, I would maybe say 8 and 4. And I think
I've put them at 5 to 8 wins. I feel like that's sort of even 4 to 8 wins. I think is the window, right?
Yeah.
If you're being brutally honest, if everyone sucks in the league or they just catch breaks or whatever, lightning in a bottle with something, 8 wins, and then if both quarterbacks get hurt or whatever, have a bunch of injuries, then 4. And I think below that, then people are gonna already be annoyed with Brent, unfortunately, for him, because they've just been so bad for so long.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, I would probably put the floor for what I would reasonably expect at 4 wins. And if anything worse than that happens, I'm probably starting to have some questions of, did I buy too much in on this coaching hire? There's some real questions, I think, being asked. Or just something has gone horribly wrong injury-wise or something like that.
It would shock me.
I'll say 6-6 as well, though. But the reason I bring up the 4 thing being the floor is that I am still seeing the win total out there in Vegas at 4.5, and you can get plus money on the over.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were inclined to gamble, I would say that's a reasonable bet to make. Like, the ACC is hard to gamble on unless you're betting on Clemson. Because even Florida State, if you go back and look what they did, it was beating up on the Sisters of the Poor in the second half of last year.
Yep.
I mean, Norvell's seat was getting hot in the middle of the year, and then they went on their run. It really started with Georgia Tech, I think it was. And kind of beat up on bad teams at the end of their season. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know who the number 2 team is. I think it's Florida State just based on talent, but Louisville doesn't play anybody. Like, NC State, that guy. I now have a nickname for Dave Doran, which is I call him the cockroach of the ACC. Just survives, and you cannot kill him. And when you think you've got him cornered, he finds a way to, like, keep winning and get that contract extension.
That was Narduzzi and Dazio even for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, Narduzzi is interesting because they do a lot with a little, man. They just are really a tough team to beat. They don't. That's what Brent brought last year. They didn't beat themselves, right? And that's what you like about, I think that's, what Sam Pittman's doing at Arkansas to a lesser extent. Like, a lot of these O-line coach type personality guys or defensive coordinator guys that are tough, hard-nosed guys, they'll bring a team that's like that. And in this day and age, it sometimes is enough to win. Georgia Tech basically won because of that. Like, kids just believed that they had a shot. And that was something Brent talked about at the ACC kickoff. He said when he took the job that there were games that they had gone into in the past where the players and the coaches didn't even think they had a shot going into the game. And you can never do that. Like, that's one of the most fundamental tenets of being, playing this sport is you got to believe you have a shot when you go on the field.
I remember hearing the story from the 2008 Georgia game where they were down 28-12 at halftime. And I don't know if it was Sean Bedford or Roddy Jones or someone told this story that they went into the locker room, they had the whole speech, got snacks, did whatever they do. They come back out, and right before they leave the tunnel, Paul Johnson turns around and says, if anybody here does not believe that we can win this game right now, turn around, go back in the locker room, take your pads off, you're done. It's like, if you come out here, you better believe that we can win this game. And next thing you know, I mean, they had the lead by like the middle of the third quarter, basically. And that 16. I'm with you. How do you coach not believing that you can win?
Some people do, man, and it's a shame. And I think that was part of their problem, is that I think Geoff believed so much in that they had all these obstacles and wasn't the right guy for the job that he lost the plot. That you got to instill confidence in your team that they have to see it and believe it in you too. And I think they thought he was full of crap after a while, the kids and the coaches, and it death spiraled on them. As soon as they hit adversity, they folded up typically. And that's not a way to run a program. So, I'll be curious to see what it looks like. I have no idea. I have no expectations. My one expectation now, at least, is that I go into a game and I think they have a fighter's chance again, which I haven't really felt like since Paul Johnson retired. So I think it's good for Georgia Tech fans. If you believe you can win, you have a shot, then you've got a puncher's chance.
Yep. I completely agree. Kelly, do you have another minute? I want to ask you about one more thing that I'm kind of curious to get your take on.
You're not going to ask me about conference realignment, are you?
I have no interest in talking about that right now. The one other thing that has kind of stuck out to me that I found is very interesting about the way that Brent Key talks, and I know that there was somebody that asked him at media days, what are you expected to win this many games? Are you expecting this? Are you expecting that? And he always goes back to, we got to focus on the way that we practice every day, on our preparations and all this stuff. And it sounds very much what I understand is like Saban-esque. In a way of, we're not preparing for our opponent. We're focusing on our technique and the way that, we play the game, all this stuff. Does that track with you, resonate with you, like the way that he talks about that? I know it seems very authentic, but like, does it resonate with you the way that he talks about that? And do you think that that makes an impact on the team?
Yeah, I think it's this expectation of if you do your job, we will have an opportunity to win a game. And so everyone has to do their job. All 11 guys on the field at any given moment. If you execute your one part of things, something good is most likely going to happen. And so that's that Nick Saban philosophy, right? Like attention to detail and be detailed in everything that you do. And it gets into things like him, he quadrupled the nutrition budget for the team, and hired 2 people to help the nutritionist make sure that the players had, they have like fresh fruit during practice now to help hydrate and gets their blood sugar up and stuff like that. Like just those little things. Those are all Saban things. Saban, there were rumors of them doing like blood testing to see what like people needed to eat and things like that, and then carving diets based on genetics and all those kinds of things in Alabama. Like that's always been sort of the rumbling that there's all this science sort of behind. And I think he's not far from that. Like he believes in some aspects of the science thing, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's if you do your job and everyone on the field does their job, you have an opportunity to win the game. And so I think that it's not lip service. It's definitely his credo and like how he's been. And I think O'Leary was like that as well, who he worked for too. Like, and being tough, and that's why they moved practice to the afternoon for camp. Like, it was miserable out there today. Like, we were sweating like crazy, like just watching them. And they take breaks. They figured out that the AC actually works in the indoor, which for some reason they didn't know was working. So it's actually nice in there. So when they go in, they actually get a real break. Just like those little things. I think I think Brent is very genuine, and that's the thing that I've appreciated since I've gotten to know him over the last 4 or 5 years. Every conversation I've had with him, private, personal stuff, or football related, has been very genuine and honest. And he's very genuine and honest even about our relationship and how it works and his expectations and like him understanding that it is transactional to an extent, but we have a friendship. But it is also a business friendship. It's not like we're going to go hang out at the beach or something. So I think it's cool. Like all of those things make a lot of sense to me and are the traits I've seen in successful coaches, Paul Johnson and other people that have been around, Mark Richt. Like he has some of that X factor stuff, and I think it just didn't come out because he was always the O-line coach who was grumpy and losing his voice. And that's the nature of that job.
Mike, I'm good. Anything else?
Good on my end.
Kelly, this has been awesome. Really, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, happy to come on.
You want to tell the people real quick where they can find your stuff?
Sure. On what was formerly called Twitter, I don't know what the hell it's called now, Kelly_Quinlan. I started Threads. I'm not using it yet, but that's like Jackets Online, Instagram. Not big on that. I got to start doing it now because it sounds like Twitter's dying. JacketsOnline.com is where you will find my work on the Rivals Network covering Georgia Tech. We talk about all this stuff on the message board. We consider it basically a version of Cheers, the bar, where you walk in and talk about whatever's going on in the world. We have even for people who want to talk politics, I actually have a thread that I do not touch where people can scream at each other about politics. So like we get into everything. Barbecue threads, whatever, and then traditional coverage, scoop on what's going on with the team, insider information, all those things that you can't find anywhere else is on Jackets Online. It's the preeminent site for Georgia Tech athletic sports coverage.
Yep. A lot of recruiting coverage as well. It continues to be a big deal.
Russell does a great job, and I help out there. And then we have Russ Wood who helps with basketball recruiting. So we have a good staff of people. Just very excited to maybe have some more competitive products to cover for the next few years again.
Absolutely. As I tell people all the time, if you care enough about Georgia Tech football to be listening to this podcast, it is well worth your $100 a year. So go subscribe to jacketsonline.com if you have not already. Kelly, there's been
like a Chick-fil-A meal, I think, these days, probably.
Yeah, like once a month or so. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
absolutely. Kelly, it's been awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time here.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, sir. All right, Mike, let's get out of here. We're going to go back and preview some more teams. In the meantime, come find us on Twitter. I'm at FTRSJoey. Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days. I'm at FTRSJoey. He's at Mike McDaniel SI, together at BC Podcast ACC. And once again, go find Kelly Quinlan on Twitter, at Kelly_Quinlan, or at Jackets Online, I believe is the Twitter handle you mentioned. We are on iTunes, Spotify, all the good places you go find your podcast. Go find us there. Send us an email, basketballconferencepodcast@gmail.com.
Nailed it.
Thank you. Mike, where else on the social medias?
Facebook.com/basketball conference, rate, review, find some of the podcasts there.
Occasionally, yes. Please do. Please do. Appreciate
Yes.
that.
And Instagram as well, at BC Podcast ACC.
If you haven't already subscribed on YouTube, do that too. YouTube.com/@the ACC Football Podcast. We appreciate that. Mike, anything else? Did I forget anything?
I think we're good. Kelly, appreciate it, man.
No problem, guys.
All right. For that guy, Mr. Mike McDaniel, and for Mr. Kelly Quinlan, I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Until next time, go Jackets and go ACC.